Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Life podcast. On today's show, we have Belinda Farrell. I had a wonderful conversation with her. She's an author. She's a very spiritual woman. She practices a bunch of reconnective healing, Huna classes, Hawaii, all sorts of Hawaiian healing practices. Man, what an honor to have you on the show, Belinda. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with me. I thought we had a great conversation. Folks, enjoy it. Welcome to the Get a Grip on Life podcast, Belinda Farrell.
Great to be here.
Yes, thanks for coming on. So I'm reading your biography, and it's hard to know where to start.
I know. God, I just came in full throttle. That's all.
Yeah, let's start with your book, Find Your Friggin Joy. Where did the inspiration for that come, and why did you write the book?
Well, after you've had many experiences, you finally think you have something worthy of sharing with other people. And I had lost my son, which was the most devastating blow a mother can ever go through. He overdosed on painkillers after some unsuccessful back surgeries. He had seen me heal my back without surgery, but he himself couldn't go inside because that's where the work is going inside and clearing things up. And he took the route of the painkillers, and they did him in.
Is that Percocet or OxyContin thing? That's
yes.
That's a huge problem in the United States right now.
Yeah. And I'm just so opposed to drugs, I won't even take an aspirin. So I'm just the opposite. I just kind of grit through it and feel that the pain is more or less a wake-up call that something's not right and you need to address it. And it's like addressing a little 2-year-old that's having a temper tantrum. And it says, pay attention to me because my back, my book is about how I healed my back without surgery. And it completely allowed me to collapse. I had herniated discs, I had nerve damage. Pain was excruciating. I did take at that time some codeine to get out of the pain so I could concentrate on the healing. And my son saw me go through this, completely. But he just wasn't there to do the work. I had been studying the ancient Hawaiian healing practices in Hawaii for the last 3 years. And their whole point was to clear the pipeline that would reach your higher self. And when you cleared the pipeline, you could send your desires up the pipeline, and the higher self would bring that down into your physical body. That's literally what happened. I got rid of or closure of some horrible memories that I had lodged in my back, in my spine, that I didn't even know were there. And that just by breathing and calling them up while I was bedridden, put closure on them and allowed me to see them. It's like, popping a pimple or cleaning out your closet. It just releases this debris inside of you. And then I started concentrating on climbing trees. And I used to love to climb trees as a kid, jump from one rooftop to another and get to this tree and get that fruit and steal, in other words, stealing fruit. And so I just saw myself doing that again, and that you get your unconscious, which is running your body, get that excited. And it was excited about climbing trees, so it sent that desire up to the higher self. Everybody has a higher self. And the higher self just brings that down into the physical body. I know it's kind of hard to imagine, but that's actually what happened. And within about 4 days, I healed.
Whew, you know what's interesting? So if I had met you 8 months ago, I would have said that you're a complete quack, and that's crazy. Okay. But it's interesting. I've been working with a spiritual coach, and he's an I don't know what he's a messenger from God. Let's put it that way. And he introduced me to something called Tibetan heart meditation and spinal breathing. Okay. And I've gone on a journey with him, and it's a lot of it's cataloged on this show, the Get a Grip on Life show. But there is a world within that people are in our culture have been told to ignore completely. And
Mm.
I think at our peril, because there's something to this. So I haven't had any specific physical healings when it comes to any chronic pain or back injuries like that. But I have actually, and I know this is not going to sound crazy to you, but it might sound crazy to a lot of people who are listening. Look, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm 41 years old. I have 4 children. I function in the world normally. I'm not on a, sitting in a monastery, but I have actually cleaned a lot of negative energy out of my soul with the Tibetan heart meditations. And it has
Yeah.
improved my relationships with other people drastically. And you're
Yes,
saying that, in fact, you can actually find healing in that space as well.
absolutely. It's the way you talk to your unconscious mind, which is running your body, and then your conscious mind, which is your ego. It has to agree that it's okay to do this breathing, that it's okay to do the cleaning, because you have free will. And that free will prevents you from going inside and doing this cleaning on a regular basis. So when your conscious and the unconscious work as a team, they work as a buddy system. And that's what I did. I just said, okay, we're going to clean this stuff out and we're going to reach the higher self. That was the whole point.
Mm.
When Max Freedom Long, he was a teacher and a researcher. He's the one that I've learned a lot of this from his books and his writing. He went to Hawaii in about 1917, and he saw witnessed these amazing healings that these kahunas were doing. And he said, well, where's this written down? Nowhere was written down, nowhere. And he was fascinated as to how these healings took place. So he started on a journey, and he started chronicling, and writing down all of the things that he saw. And that's what I, was able to study, were these teachings of Max Freedom Long.
So that's Max, M-A-X, freedom, as in the spelling of the word freedom, and then L-O-N-G.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll have that in the notes for listeners if they want to. We'll link to his information and books. But, I really feel like Westerners in our ignorance, our literature and from literatures all across the world are consistently speaking of healing and ways in which humans can heal themselves. So if you're talking about Christ, you're talking about the Jewish scriptures, you're talking about Eastern scriptures, Tibetan. There's healing talk in all of these scriptures from the ancients. And in our ignorance, I think we've abandoned these processes in favor of medical interventions. And I feel as if there's a spirit in our society which is moving back towards that. Do you feel the same thing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, people want to have an alternative. I was a stunt car driver during my 40s, and that's in the book as well. And I was an adrenaline junkie. I mean, to the point where I would, ride my bike till I was exhausted. I'd rollerblade, I'd run, I just didn't rest. And that's not a real good recipe for your body. I wasn't listening to what it was saying until it started hurting. And I started dragging my left leg, and then finally collapsed. And that's when I was bedridden. And I had no choice but to listen to my body then. But you've got to be able to hear what's going on in your body in order to do something, in order to, take a note and say, okay, this is not working. So what can I do? And at the time when I collapsed, I had no insurance because I wasn't doing my stunt car work. I wasn't being hired to do jobs. I couldn't walk. So I was dropped from my medical insurance. So when you have no medical insurance, you're very motivated to do your own healing. That's really how it occurred.
Well, it's interesting. In Canada, healthcare is a human right, and that's a major difference between Canada and the United States. You have the right to bear arms, but not the right to healthcare. It's a major difference. It's worth a whole podcast and discussion on that for sure.
Totally.
But
Totally.
so you healed yourself, and in that process, so you're lying in bed, you're in extreme pain, your back is hurting. There's nothing worse than back pain. I think most people, knee pain or whatever, but back pain is particularly debilitating for everyone. What was it that was sending you what did you learn to listen to your pain and follow it down somewhere? How did you go about this?
Well, I knew that I had no other choice but I had been studying the Huna for 3 years on the Big Island. And I said, I have to really see if this works now. I have to do the recipe that I learned from Max Freedom Long, from the Kahunas, from the Hawaiians, and clear out these negative thought forms and, do the Ho'oponopono, which is an ancient self-forgiveness. And then I knew I would start to feel better. I didn't know how much better, but I had no choice. I just had to make it work. And I believed that I could. And when I was doing my breathing, I did a lot of Ha breathing, which is taking a deep breath through the nose and then a Ha breath, as though you're filling a glass of water up at the top of your head. With each breath you take, you're filling that glass of water. And since the higher self has no body, it's like you're giving it a gift so it'll connect with your physical body. And that's what I kept doing. And I kept doing it 24/7. I had no distractions other than I just knew I was going to heal. And one huge memory came out, and that's on page 109 of my book, where a tiny fetus was released and thrown out into the universe just like a piece of garbage. And that was me as a fetus. And I was just completely in fear because I was going at about 1,000,000 miles an hour and all these asteroids and comets were, swirling around me. And this little baby was just all tucked in and just trying to avoid all this collision. And then these hands came and reached out and took the baby and carefully placed me in the arms of this divine being that was there. I don't know, just seemed divine. And I was just noticing all the debris below me, but feeling safe. And then finally feeling loved and finally feeling accepted and that I didn't have to try hard. And I woke up from that dream sweat or whatever it was. I was in a pool of sweat. And the first thing I wanted to do was call my mother. And I asked her what happened at my birth and I kind of told her everything. She said, I'd never told you this, but your father and I had taken you to 3 abortion clinics because I just did not think I could have you. It was a mistake at that time. And they refused to do the abortions. But that child, me, you register everything, every emotion that's from your mother. So that feeling of not being wanted or just being thrown away or having to prove your love had been embedded in the bowels of my back. I guess that's what I want to say. And they were released because I realized that I was loved beyond measure and by people that weren't necessarily my human parents, but they still loved me. And they were divine and they were wonderful. And I didn't have to try so hard anymore to feel worthy to be loved. And my healing really accelerated after that. And then I started to see myself climbing trees because the initial darkness from that memory was taken away. And then I could give that pipeline what I really wanted, which was a back that could climb trees again.
And did you climb some trees?
I did. And to this day, I do.
That is such a wonderful story. So let me ask you a little bit. I'm actually flabbergasted, but at how much your story is dovetailing with where I'm at in my own life. Tell me a little bit about the difference between emotional pain and physical pain. If that's a decent question. I don't know if that makes sense to you. Because I find that emotional pain can actually be as crushing or as destroying as actual physical pain as well. And what you're saying is that the emotional pain actually manifested itself physically in you.
Yeah. The physical pain is the last thing that happens. At the deepest root level, you have some kind of an emotional trauma that triggers the body to do certain things. Like if you are constantly getting angry and your buttons are being pushed in this anger, your unconscious mind that runs your body keeps releasing chemicals that keep bruising your heart muscle. And it'll keep bruising the heart muscle until finally the heart muscle will, explode with a heart attack or tear because it's broken. It runs your body, your emotions. So you have to be careful of what you say to yourself. What I had said to myself to get into that fix that I was in with my back is that I was not feeling supported. I was raised in a family who went through the Depression, and things were hard, to come by, and money was scarce. And, I just, the thought pattern that was in my life was, you can't be supported. You have to find somebody else to support you. You can't do it yourself. You're too weak. You can't support yourself. So I would internally say that to myself. Gradually, my back stopped supporting me. It was just listening to what I was saying. So I had to completely flip that around and say, thank you for remembering to support me. Thank you for regenerating. And then I just flooded myself with that different sentence structure because I felt it, I believed it. I would stand up against a tree and imagine that trunk was in my spine, that it was strong and supporting me, that, everything I did from that moment on was the opposite of what I had grown up to believe.
Wow. It's interesting that I find trees such a wonderful part of nature now. There's something about trees
Yeah.
that's really interesting. I had a very deep, profound heart imagery exercise where I was in a meditation. And that's my story. I'm not going to go into it. But after it, I had to leave my studio. I was in here. I had to leave my studio and I was looking for something and I was walking around outside. It was freezing cold and I didn't have my coat on and I was walking. I was searching for something, searching. And I was walking around the back parking lot. I turned this corner and this is an industrial area. And then I saw at the street well, for whatever reason, there was this big old tree there. And I walked up to him and I just started hugging him. And I said, I love you, man. Thank you for all the
Yeah.
oxygen. And I looking at this tree and it's like, you've been here probably 300 years and you've seen this was forest and then farmland and now it's industrial. And I was hugging this tree and I felt he was lonely, like he missed his friends or something. I don't know what it was, but trees are very spiritual beings, actually.
Yes. Oh, you can talk to trees. I've even put my hand through a tree. My son saw me do that once and he
Wow.
got scared. Yeah, it just went right through it and came back out again. That was in Muir Woods,
Wow.
Francisco.
Whew. So tell me, tell me.
Woo! I know.
Yeah, I mean, look,
I feel like
people are gonna like this. I'm a straight guy. I mean, I'm a straight shooter. I have a business, and I've encountered the spiritual world, and I'm here to tell people it's either as real or more real than the world we're in now. We're creatures of the light, and there's light inside, and there's light outside.
right.
And so, tell me a little bit about this self-forgiveness. I wrote that down when you said it,
Mm.
and I'm interested in that.
I do it every single day. It's cord cutting. It's
Hmm.
we have stories that we repeat over and over and over again, and we have interpretations as to what happened to us. And they're like visual images in our brain. So we run these cameras over and over and over again until we believe the stories. And that can create what is called a web or a cord, or things that just compile and they become heavy, if they're not cut or if they're not dissolved.
Hmm.
And so the Hawaiians called it aka, I mean, it's even in the Bible as, the webs that we weave around ourselves.
Hmm.
And if you leave that unbalanced, untouched, it's like you just carrying around a sack of potatoes with you everywhere you go. It's the same thing over and over and over again. You repeat the same mistakes. So the Hawaiians in the old days, they would meet at sunset. And as the sun would go down into the water, they'd gather as a family and they would release any anger, any hurt, any
Hmm.
fear, any sadness, guilt, shame. And it would just go down into the water and dissipate. It would
Hmm.
dissolve. And so we do this now with our higher self. So, like at night, I take a bath, it's a ritual, and I will put all the people or the thought forms that I've had during the day, I'll make them very tiny, put them down like on a stage. And I have this on a CD. It's called Chant and Forgiveness. It'll take you through this process of self forgiveness. But I just see them all. I see myself down there. I see anything I've involved myself with during the day that doesn't serve me anymore.
Hmm.
And then I just take a deep breath and I offer the forgiveness to myself. It's like me and my higher self saying, I'm sorry. I love you. I
Hmm.
forgive you. Thank you. Just those four phrases. And then you take a cutting instrument or some kind of an imaginary, I just shake my shoulders and I just spin this cutting instrument around me. And then these images float away and you're back in present time.
Hmm. That's beautiful. It's interesting because the guy I was telling you about, he's introduced me to a process called, which sounds very similar, although it doesn't involve the bath.
Well, you can do this anywhere.
Sure. He calls it reversing. And
Uh-huh.
what it is, it's a meditative practice where a couple times every day, you stop for 5 minutes and you replay your day in your head. And you go back and you clean the negative emotion away. So if you had a bad interaction with somebody, you actually review that emotion as a witness and you allow any of the energy that has accumulated on you from that interaction to dissipate and be relieved in a way. And anything that was beautiful or anything that was inspiring, you can reabsorb that energy back from it. So if you had a very good
Mm.
interaction, he calls it reversing. It's very powerful practice. It's actually
Wow.
one of the goals I had this year was to become a better human resources manager for my people. And reversing has been the number one thing that has helped me do that, to go back and just
Yeah.
analyze, and not in a judgmental way, but just as the observer, as the witness, and see these interactions. And it sounds almost very similar. Have you ever heard of the Chinese poet Lao Tzu or
Oh,
Lao
yeah.
Tzu?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
the opening line of his famous work, the Tao Te Ching, is, "The name that can be named is not the eternal name," right? And
Right.
a lot of these things that people are giving words to, it's sort of like, you ever go to the zoo and sit and watch the chimpanzees for half an hour?
They sit and watch us.
Well, both ways. It goes
Yeah.
both ways. But you sit and watch them, and then you realize that they're communicating with
Yeah.
one another, and they're kind of
Right.
grunting, and they're hoo hoo
Uh-huh.
hoo. But the grunting and the sounds and all that are kind of secondary to the actions that are going on in the group. And you can see who's the alpha male, who's the alpha female,
Mhm.
who kind of doesn't like the alpha and maybe like aiming for him a little bit. And I think, if we're to be humble, I think human conversation and words and the definitions of words and the semantics and how they're used and in what generation they're used can be very confusing at times. And so it's like you're talking about a process you use for self-forgiveness, and this person calls it reversing. And in the Christian religion, it's the blood of Jesus was washing over you. And then in different religions, you have these different ceremonies that are all sort of, if you take away the human institution side of it, which is always going to be corrupt, if you look at those processes, the Hawaiian process, they're all talking about the same thing in a way.
Right.
This
The
process of,
cleansing.
yes, this cleansing of the
It's all
negative
cleansing.
emotions. Yes.
Exactly. You want to just get to a place of neutrality, of
Hmm.
being neutral with it. How do you feel about your mother and father when that's brought up? Does it really hit your buttons? So
Hmm.
you want to just clear in my CD of Chant and Forgiveness, I have you put your mother and father down below you, and all your ancestors and all your siblings and anybody that was relative to you, and people that are authority figures. How do you feel about money? All those things are put down below. How do you look at your job? What takes your power away? All of these things, they create a cord because you're emotionally attached to it. If you have no emotion attached to it, then the cord doesn't form. It just goes away because you're not physically connected to it.
So you're saying it's the same thing. It's so Luke says this. Luke Sellers and beautiful man. He says, "Who feels envy? Who is it that feels the envy? If you're the witness, if you're in the eye of the storm and the world is swirling around you, but you're not, because most of us spend our lives in the storm, where you're swirling around in these emotions and they're pulling you this way and they're pulling you that way.
Right.
But if you can find your way to the center of the storm and witness it, then who feels the envy? Who feels the anger? Who is it? And then when you think of it that way, all of a sudden your relationship to your emotions changes significantly. You're speaking to the same thing in a way.
I know. This was ancient.
It is.
It was just ancient, but it makes a difference when you use it. And I can cut cords with someone here, and a person 3,000 miles away can feel the benefit of whatever I did. And they may call you on the phone, just say, I'm sorry, I apologize for what I did to you. Or when I was first starting to do this, I was running into people that I hadn't seen in years. And I was, why am I running into them? And I'm thinking, oh, that's right, they did me wrong, or something happened, and I need to cut cords and make amends with this person so that it can unburden myself. I mean, even the original Lord's Prayer, there's a place in there where it says, untie the tangled threads of destiny that bind us, as we release others from the entanglement of past mistakes. Do not let us be seduced by that which would divert us from our true purpose, but illuminate the opportunities of the present moment. It's all about the present moment. And you can't be in the present moment if you're dragging the past with you.
In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, the evil of the day is sufficient thereof. The future is where the future and the past is where all this anxiety is.
Right.
There's no anxiety in the present if you don't want it to be there. Wow. Tell me a little bit what's interesting. I'm gonna ask you something. So I'm in the lighting business, and I do a podcast on the lighting business, commercial lighting. But sometimes we run into some interesting people, and so I interviewed this researcher who is in charge of National Research Council of Canada, the lighting project. Her name is Dr. Jennifer Veach, and we were having a conversation about what light actually is. Okay, so light. Okay, so in all scriptures from all traditions talks about humans as being children of the light, and the goodness is in the light, right? And so I was talking to her, and scientists actually have no idea what light is. And when I was speaking to her about it, during the conversation, I blurted out, I said, Dr. Veach, this is like the fish figuring out that they're in the water.
That's true.
Because we're really swimming in light. The fact that I can see you right now, and this is all transmitted by fiber optic cables or light, and when we're interacting with one another, we're seeing projections of light on one another. And so there's something to light. And I believe also that there's an interior light that you can go in and be with, that's inside of you, and as well that projects out of you. And I think that there are people that can see that light on others. Yes. Not me.
Well, don't you feel when you're with somebody and they have good energy, I could just call it good energy, but if there's this darkness or this kind of, I just want to walk away or run away or just fly away.
For sure.
Can't stand being, and so it's a feeling. So you either can sense that light or you can sense that darkness. So your job is just to shine your light where there's darkness. That's,
Hmm.
I mean, we do depossession. I do depossession,
What's
to
that?
send
Depossession?
depossession. It's another word for spirits that, are here on the earth plane and they wish to move to a higher level, but they don't know how to do it. So you graciously send them to the light. I
This is
guess that's what you call
depossession, as in possessing something, holding it, owning it. Depossession?
it.
Is that what you're saying?
Depossession. Well, it's as though maybe some people are possessed with more darkness
Oh,
than light,
right.
and they just haven't made it to the next level. So I do a lot of chanting
Hmm.
that just offers them a safe passage, or a guide to the light, and it just works. It's more of Hawaiian words that send them rather than the English.
Hmm. The name that can be named is not the eternal name, of course. Tell me a
Mm.
little bit about the past life regression.
Well, that's when people are able to go back to some of the lives they've lived before and access um, the memories that are lodged inside them. I mean, what makes somebody want to read all about the Civil War to the point where they just are
Hmm.
obsessed with Civil War?
Hmm.
And maybe their grandfather was in the Civil War, or their uncles, and they had a life, maybe they were killed in the Civil War, but it just more or less rings true to them that they've experienced this before. I remember going to Europe and being at Anne Hathaway's cottage, and this was for William Shakespeare at Stratford-on-Avon. And
Hmm.
I couldn't go into that cottage because I felt I had been some kind of a servant or chambermaid. I could tell my husband every single room that he had gone into. And he was amazed. He said, "Are you sure you didn't go in there?" I said, "No, I used to live there."
Hmm.
And I knew what everything was there. It was bizarre. But so when you do past life regression, you're able to access some of those experiences, some of those lives. And for some people, it brings closure. It
Hmm.
brings closure to things that they were already curious about and said, "Oh, I knew that I had known that person before, that I'd lived that life before." And that just validated it. So it's a hypnosis uh, process of taking somebody back. They have to be open to do it.
So I have in my meditative practice, and let me ask you something. Is there something to having a daily meditative practice that's very important, that you do it on a daily basis at around the same time and you do it on a regular basis? Is that something that's important for all this?
I think it's important for you to have relationship with your unconscious mind, which is storing all of your memories and thought forms and running your body. I mean, that's the most important part of your body is your unconscious. And so they called him George in the Hawaiian terms, but you can call him anything. You can call him
Sure.
Georgia. But the more relationship you have with the unconscious and going into a meditation with that, the more that part of you will stand up for you and do things. I carry a pendulum and I go shopping with the pendulum. And if I see something on the shelf that I'm not sure about, I'll hold it and I'll ask George if that's going to be good for my body or if it's going to be good for my higher self. I just ask a yes or a no answer. And we have such a good rapport that he just answers right away. And if he says no, I walk away. If he says yes, I take it.
And George, is he a masculine presence or is he just named George?
He's just named George, or she is named
She named.
George.
Okay.
I can
So,
also ask, if somebody's pregnant, like we have a neighbor and George has never been wrong. I'll put my hand on their tummy, even if it's a couple weeks old, and
hmm,
say, "Are you going to be a boy? Or are you going to be a girl? Are you going to be either?" And they always are right. George is always right. We talk to the fetus.
hmm.
It's
The
fascinating.
the internal world that I've become aware of now, and I'm just sort of figuring out through my meditative practice and the Tibetan heart method and all these names that they're given, but it's all really kind of touching the same thing. How do you feel? Like, I've been told that that they've time traveled in a sense through that world back to earlier times in their life, and that. Do you have any information about this sort of thing?
Well, that's shamanic. That's being able to time travel, like especially in your dreams. And it's fascinating, to be able to do that. There was a time when I was doing that and doing a lot of traveling back and forth to Hawaii. And there was a particular rock that was at this house. And it seemed like if you touched this rock, it would just take you to these other lands. And the rock disappeared. I don't know what happened to it. But I do believe that, it can happen, and that we can have things that'll help us do it even more. And I know in your dreams, if you can program yourself through the unconscious and ask George to take you on a trip in your dreams and maybe give you some type of response or answer to a problem or something that you're working on, I believe that he will do that. You keep a notebook at your bedside and write down all these clues and things. You can have some lucid dreams and do some time travel.
So I lucid dream. I've always done that since I was a child. I've never gotten to a point where I was able to control the dream, but I've been in many dreams where I knew I was dreaming and was observing what was happening in the dream from, well, what you call an ability to remember it when I was then awake, that I was dreaming. But are you saying that you can teach yourself to lucid dream at any age?
If you are in touch with the unconscious, yes, because you and the unconscious, you guys are buddies, and the unconscious will do anything that you ask it to do. It's like a little brother listening to its big brother give it commands.
Tell me, I have to ask you this one. Why are fire walks important to you? 18 of them. It's like it stands out as something. It's a one sentence. She completed 18 fire walks. Okay.
That's funny. I was married 18 years, and I guess, I was working with Tony Robbins for 5 years, and I did all these fireworks. And after the 18th one, I said, I don't need to do any more. And that was unconscious. So I think in my mind, each one of those firewalks stood for every year I was married. But that's just my experience. You can do 1, 2, 3, you can do 53. But they do help you to overcome your fear, because if you can say to yourself, gee, I just walked on 2,000 degrees of hot coals. I wonder what else I can do in my life that I thought I couldn't do. And that's how it came up for me. I wanted to drive a race car. And I thought, I can't drive a race car. And then, of course, Tony's mantra is, if you say you can't, you must. And if you must, you will. So I did.
Self-talk is so important.
Totally.
I think people drive around in their cars. It's you can go to the gym. So I go to the gym, and you'll go to the gym and you'll see people that are there because they want to be fit or healthy or whatever. But then you can see people that are there that are punishing themselves in a way. They're using you understand when you can see that there's like, I shouldn't have had that donut last night. How did I'm such an idiot. You can literally feel it in their energy. I don't know if you notice this, but you can feel it. It's particular. I think I notice it more with women than men, that they're there and they're angry with themselves, or their self-image is there, and they're thinking, oh, I'm not as fit as this person. There's some envy going on. I think self-talk is way what you say to yourself, or what you think to yourself about the world around you. And I think America as a country has some pretty negative self-talk right now. I
used to do these personal breakthrough sessions with people, and I would have them come with a sheet of what they said to themselves. I wanted to hear what their internal dialogue was. And for the most part, people are self-loathing. They hate themselves.
Yep.
They just hate themselves. And when I'd have them look at the sheet and say, this is what's running your body. I mean, get a grip. You know,
Sure.
you don't want this to be, hello.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, that would be the very first indication that they needed to make a shift, a 180 degree. So for me as well, if I hear myself saying something, I correct myself. I say, thank you for sharing, and I'm sorry. And then you do your cord cutting. You always, forgive yourself for having those kinds of thoughts and put yourself back on the right track so that the divinity of you can come in and fill that up with light, fills it with a void.
Yeah, it's interesting about I think and I'm not against anything, medical, modern medicine or, cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm sure, all these things, they're certainly wonderful and they have their place. But I think a lot of people's problems are way more spiritual than they're willing to admit.
I agree.
A lot of people are, walking around 100 pounds. Like I'll tell you this, when I started with Luke, I started washing my face more. I lost 22 pounds. No, it's my relationship to food changed, like the way I relate to food, why I eat food, what I eat. A lot of when you start loving yourself, so he calls it showing up for yourself. Show up for yourself every day. What is it that you have to do every day? Never mind meditation or anything like that. We're talking about getting enough sleep, exercising, spending some time in nature, eating the right food, drinking enough water, making sure you're going to the bathroom correctly, like these things. And you start doing that for yourself every day, you're going to start emanating much more positive vibrations to people, and things will change. So I started washing my face more. It's crazy. I point that out to people. Oh, you don't wash your face?
Yeah, that's probably true. And I was afraid of the water, and I had to keep going to Hawaii to do all my training. And then eventually the dolphins called me into the ocean and recruited me.
And now, do you love the water?
I love Hawaiian ocean. I will go out in the ocean and swim with the dolphins, but I'm here in Santa Cruz and it's cold. The surfers go out with very, very thick, wetsuits. Not me. But I love to swim in Hawaii, and I used to 20 years take people to swim with the wild dolphins there. Call them in. And they're amazing. They're the ones that really just can wipe out any kind of sadness and fear from you and just put you in unconditional love.
It's unbelievable how much just like slight differences in wording and all that the way you speak and other people that are in this world speak. It's really incredible how all of a sudden so many people are coming into my life that are telling me. And I think this, what we're doing, trying to get this message out to people. It's not about anything woo woo. It's not like, ooh, yeah, I'm new age or whatever. It's about really understanding who you are in the universe. You are a child of the light. You're put here for a reason. There's a reason you exist. You are worthy, important, no matter what you've done in your past. You can be forgiven. And the most important forgiveness is from yourself.
Exactly. That's the part people don't understand.
Or maybe that's the only forgiveness. That's the only forgiveness.
I think so. I think you've hit upon the rock of Gibraltar.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, it's if other people are unwilling to forgive you, it's really their problem.
Well, it's not, you can't redo the past. I mean, the past happened, the event happened. You can't change that. The only thing you can change is the way you're looking at it.
And the way you're experiencing it and releasing it, letting it be. So all the problems in life, if you take your mind, which your mind thinks about the future and the past, and it's interesting. I have a little theory. I want to run it by you because I think you might understand this. I don't believe the human brain is designed to remember anything. Okay. Okay. I don't think it is. Okay. I think the reason our brains work the way they do And the idea that we have a memory is not because you want to remember what happened. If you look at eyewitness accounts, everyone says, oh, I remember exactly where I was on September 11th, 2001. I remember exactly what I was doing when John F. Kennedy was shot in these moments. And they've actually tested people, and their versions of events change every single, they have the person write it down right after what happened after 9/11. They write it down. They come back 2 years later. They tell me exactly, oh yeah, I remember everything. Write it down. It's completely different. It's completely different than the previous version. And every time it changes as they go through their life. I actually believe our brains are not designed to remember the past, but are designed to interact with the future or predict the future in some way. So you go through your life, and the reason why you carry these emotional memories or these places in the past is so that you can get better and better at interacting with the world. And I think a lot of people's depression and anxiety, and I know I was a heavy with anxiety. I think a lot of people's depression and anxiety, I'm not going to write everything off. I'm not a doctor. This is just my opinion. But I think a lot of it is because they know that they need to make changes. And they know that if they stay on their current path, whatever it is, being married to an abusive person or being in a bad job with a bad boss or whatever it is, they know that by not quitting or moving on or getting away from that relationship, that their life is going to continue to be bad. And their brain is telling them that. They know that the future is going to be bad if they stay on this path, but they stay on the path and they won't get off of it. They won't make the changes they need to make. And so I think that a lot of our problems are, whether you want to call it psychosomatic or whether you want to call it spiritual, whatever it is, I think a lot of the problems are because people are ignoring their spiritual self. They're ignoring the signals their body is giving them, that they're ignoring the emotions that they're being sent from, that are coming to them. And
no, you're right. You're right. I mean, that's why I left my husband. He was an orthopedic surgeon. We were married 18 years, but spiritually I was dying. And the acting, I started acting and doing some plays, and that was good therapy, but my spirit was suffering, and I didn't know what it was because I didn't even know what healing was at that time. I just knew I had to get away. And finally I made my getaway, and then my life started at 40.
Yeah.
And
I
I
think
started doing the firewalks.
a lot of people are depressed. And I think, I think that, this is, and I'm not, again, there's obviously clinical stuff. I'm not a doctor. I don't know anything about that sort of stuff. But I think a lot of people are depressed because they know their future is going to be crap, and they're unwilling to make the changes that their depression is telling them to make. It's saying you're depressed because you're on a path, or you're doing things, or you're treating your body the wrong way. Like if you're, like with men, if you're womanizing, if you're running around lying to women just so you can sleep with them or do whatever like that, and you don't care what you say, you just want to notch and put another notch in your belt, and all of a sudden at the age of 36, you're telling me you're depressed, or 38 you're depressed. Well, I mean, maybe you need to think about what, the spiritual baggage you're carrying. It's funny because you ever read that book, Pilgrim's Progress? It's very famous.
Oh, yes, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
So he's carrying around his burden, right?
Yes, exactly. His cords.
Yes. Yeah. He's carrying around his burden. He has to put his burden down. Well, if you're not willing to acknowledge and forgive yourself and acknowledge things and put down the burden, you're going to continue to feel bad, whether you call that depression, anxiety, whatever it is. And you know what the reaction is in the West? It's so common for people to blame other people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's why Huna is accepting responsibility 100% of the time. You can't study Huna unless you accept full responsibility for everything that happens to you in your life.
Wow, that's powerful. And you know what's interesting about that level? It's sort of extreme ownership or extreme responsibility. It's very empowering for people, actually. I was, when I started off working with my spiritual advisor, Luke, I said, I have a lot of conflict in my life, and, I don't know what it is. Other people won't listen or whatever. And he listened to me talk about how conflict was everybody else's problem. And he said, at the end, when I was exhausted with my blaming, he said, stop. He said, stop being the source of conflict. And I said, no, you don't understand. I'm not the source of conflict. I'm not the source of conflict. It's everybody else. Everybody
Yeah,
else is the
right.
source of conflict. It's not me. And he said to me, stop being the source of conflict, because in you, inside of you, is all the conflict that's ever happened
Yeah.
in the universe. And you are being the source of it in your life. And so many people um, are unwilling to acknowledge that they are responsible for their actions.
Right.
You're responsible for where you are right now. Oh no, it's
That's
this
right.
fault. It's that person's fault. As soon as you go down that road, you disempower yourself, you take away
Right.
your own ability to heal, your own ability to forgive, and you give it to somebody else.
Well, what you see with your eyes is what you've created on the inside. You can't see beauty unless you have beauty inside. You can't
Hmm.
see sorrow unless the sorrow is coming from inside.
Hmm.
So you just clean that up and your vision will change
Wow. I think we have a
from
little bit of
there.
extra to add onto the show here, Scott. He's going to have to work some post-production magic, because that might have been the best part of it, the last couple minutes there. But Belinda,
Sure.
I have to run. Thank you very much.
Oh,
I really pray that we meet
oh,
one day.
I do. Well, we will. Maybe we'll time travel and meet somewhere out there in the vicinity of our dreams.
I believe we'll do that. Thank you for
Maybe you
coming
were
on.
my master and I was your master and da da da.
Who knows? Who knows? I will. You know what's funny? I'm going to ask you something else. So I don't know if
Okay.
meditation is part of your practice, but obviously going internally, if you call it that or whatever it is. When I was first introduced to meditation many years ago, it was all about controlling, not thinking, breathing, and trying to empty your mind of thoughts. And while I think there's a stage of that you have to go through as a meditative student, I think that the world inside is so full of energy and light and images and everything else.
Hmm.
I don't believe it's an empty, like, to try to empty your mind. Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm sure there's something to that, but when I go inside, I actually went back in a Tibetan heart meditation, and I met myself when I was 25, and I'm stuck there right now because in that age, no, I'm stuck there between 20 and
Oh,
25 because I had a lot of trauma between the ages in my life,
uh-huh.
between the ages of 20 and 25. And I'm stuck there trying to get through that negative energy in my meditations. But I actually saw
Mm.
myself and gave myself a hug and was, saying, was quite proud of that young guy. I thought he was
Yeah.
pretty courageous, actually. So
Wow.
there's a whole
No, I
world
don't
out there.
stop. I don't stop and do stuff like that. I cut cords during the day
Mm,
and just take deep breaths during the day and just say thank you. Just
mm.
thank you. Just thank you. That's a meditation in itself, is just being grateful.
I think gratefulness is the most wonderful human emotion.
Yes,
I think it's the
totally.
highest one. I don't think there's anything sometimes when I'm lucky enough when I'm meditating, I actually feel gratefulness flowing through me.
Yep.
And I just start saying all the people I'm grateful for, all the things I'm grateful for, and it is such a wonderful, wonderful emotion. I, I,
Yeah.
it beats invoking gratitude or creating gratitude is so important in life.
Yeah. No, we're on the same page.
Wow.
You're doing amazing stuff for the planet. You've gotten a grip and beyond.
Well, it's just, you know what it is? It's you send out these positive vibrations or energy or whatever it is, and then wonderful people like you, Belinda, come into my life. So God bless you, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
All right.
Aloha.
Aloha. Bye for now.
Bye bye.
Well, Belinda, thank you for coming on the show. I really am honored to have spent an hour speaking with you. Thank you for taking the time. All of you listening, I'm very grateful for you listening to the show, supporting the show. Remember, like us on Facebook, social media, LinkedIn. We're all out there, all over the place. And if you are interested in starting your own podcast, if you're interested in creating some digital media content, go to getagripstudios.com. We're there to help you guys out. And yeah, or even just come down to 3800 Victoria Park Avenue. Scott and I will hang out with you for a bit, and we'll talk to you about making podcasts, starting podcasts, whatever you need to do. Thanks for listening. Super grateful. Bye for now.